One of the most common questions I get from you guys is, okay Marnix, I have made my own first games, maybe I'm moving out of the prototyping stage and I want to actually start earning money. But because I want to earn money, usually due to taxes, I need to actually start a business. Or maybe you even want to go full-time with game development. Also requires you to get incorporated and to truly focus a bit more on the business aspect, the monetary aspect, and how do I even start a studio? This is something I've touched upon before in like various videos about how we did it, but of course there's the issue that what we do is very specific to like our scenario. So I never wanted to give exactly what I did in like Belgium as your thing that you have to do if you want to start a company. But with this video, I want to change that a little bit. And I want to do a first installment of what I'm going to call the book club series, where I'm going to take a book. In this case, it is the Gamedev Business Handbook by Michael Futter. He's a coach, he helps with publishers, he helps with pitching to publishers, and he has actually helped us in our company as well. We've had a coaching call with him. He's helped us with our Steam sales, he's helped us with our Steam pricing, and also with determining the future of how should we do, for example, open development in the most efficient way. So in this video, I want to go over the most core parts of his book and also talk a bit more about my experiences, how they relate to that, and what the general takeaway should be. Now let's start with the basics. These are his 3 first chapters, which are finance, budgeting, and actually starting that studio. Honestly, first thing I want to tell you that is very obvious to me, it has been obvious my entire life, is don't mix your personal spending with your business spending. This is the #1 thing that you need to keep in mind even before you start a business, because if you don't do this, if you just buy your groceries with food from the company, you're gonna get in trouble. Or ideally you also want to pay for like services and things like that through the company's account, because then you can like use that as expenses. So if you make a lot of money, you can subtract that for your tax reasons. But learning to split these things is critical. And this is something that you should do like right now. Even if you're not a studio yet, if you haven't incorporated, if you have any spending or any earnings, just make a separate account for it. And it can just be a personal one. Like something I can do, for example, in my bank is I can add like multiple checking accounts. Like I can start them up for free and they're like virtual checking accounts. Maybe I can get like a debit card, but just having them separate already is key. Not just for liability reasons, but also because it helps you in getting a better overview of what am I actually spending? What am I actually earning as well? And how should I like see my flow of money going in and money going out? And then once you do have that, before you even start your company, I suggest you track everything. Just like build up a tracking mindset, and don't just track your company expenses, but track your own expenses for like a month. This is gonna save you a lot of money probably based upon a bunch of things that you didn't even know you were paying on, because money is going to be the most important thing in the end of starting a studio. It's not like how many wish lists you get. In the end, it all comes down to how much are you earning and how much is your studio spending. And if you have no idea of that, it doesn't matter if you make the best game ever. You're going to need to know these things or you're going to get in trouble and your studio probably isn't going to exist for that long. What I mean with tracking is there's plenty of free pieces of software, or even just something like an Excel where you write down all of the different things that you spent money on and you try to categorize them. So maybe you have a category for food, you have a category for entertainment, like when you go to the cinema or you go and hang out and do some sports, or your Netflix subscription, I don't care. You split all of these things up so you have a good idea of what are the different things that are costing me money in my life. And then do the same thing with income. Probably it would be like, oh, I have some pocket money, or I have my earnings from my job, or maybe I have tax returns, or anything really that you also earn. Try to categorize them and then put them like against each other. And then the third part, starting the actual studio, I'm gonna go over very quickly, because in the book he just talks mainly about like starting an LLC or whatever other like legal corporation. As someone in Belgium, like I don't care about LLCs, like Wisconsin LLCs are better or something, I don't know, I'm not like into that world. He a little bit more, but this is something that you should go to a local accountant in your own country for. Usually the first time you go to an accountant just to hear about, hey, how should I do this? How does this work? It's free, and they just hope to like acquire you as a customer then, because they give you some good advice for free and they give you a good vibe that you will stay with them. So do that. That's probably the best advice I can give. Don't try to infinitely Google things yourself, but just go and talk to someone who is actually experienced in this domain. The next part of the book talks about the production pipeline. This is what you already know generally of, hey, there's the pre-production stage where we just like try and concept some things. We try to validate, would our game idea even work? We do some market research. Then we go into the production state, which is where we make our actual code, we start making some production ready assets, and we start our like full-on marketing campaign, and then you release it. It's your post-launch support, and that's all of the different things in those stages. Honestly, if you've seen any of our other videos really on this channel, you've probably interacted with it before. I've already talked about pre-production and prototyping and how you move on from this. So this should be quite basic knowledge. And the next part is what I like to call the interacting with each other, which is the negotiation part and the partnership part. Here, he dives again quite deep in like certain things that I feel like aren't really that specific to us indie developers, such as, for example, how do you partner with existing IP, like getting Disney or someone else to license you their IP so you can make a game with like Mickey Mouse and their other characters. I don't think this is the most like applicable, because if you're a solo developer and you're barely just starting your studio, I don't think that you're gonna be reaching out to these big IPs immediately. You'll probably start working on your own IP, like your own game concept, but still it can be interesting if you just want to know a bit more how it works. What I think is more important is his part here on negotiation, because Michael Futter has a very deep focus on publishers. That's also like his main thing, is he does like pitch reviews for publishers. So publishing is his jam, and I have a whole bunch of thoughts about publishing. I'm not gonna get into those, but as someone who has like had to do a lot of negotiation for my previous sales job as well, the things he talks about are pretty solid. And one of the most important things I want to highlight is do not negotiate in bad faith. Now, what do I mean by this? There's this saying that I've heard from plenty of other developers, and I've been reflecting a bit more upon it recently, and that is that, hey, if you want a publisher, make like a list of 10 publishers or like however many you want that would fit your game, and then rank them to like how nice it would be if that specific publisher actually published your game. And then take the ones that you don't really want. Like, don't take the publishers that you actually want, but just know that, hey, the first time you're doing a publishing deal, you're probably gonna mess up in your conversations and things like that. And there's a much higher chance that you won't screw up. The idea is if you pitch to people, but you don't really care about them that much, well, you can learn a bit more about the pitching process. How should you like handle these things? And then by the time you're at like your 5th pitch, you actually pitch at your dream publisher, and you already know how it works. And Michael Futter says very clearly, do not do this. Do not negotiate in bad faith, because you're going in, you're stepping into the discussion ring basically, and from the first moment, you're not serious. From the first moment, you do not actually want to do anything with this publisher. And generally, these people can notice that. It's very visible because you won't be as invested, you won't be as interested. And also this can cause a bad stain on your record basically of, hey, you kind of ghosted them because in the end, maybe they were interested in you, but you weren't. Well, you just wasted a whole bunch of their time and probably also your time for no good reason, because you weren't handling in good faith. You weren't going into the discussions actually wanting to go and get a partnership with them. The world of publishers is very small and people move around all the time, so it's very easy to taint your reputation there and go into future publisher meetings where the publisher actually knows that, hey, this guy before has already negotiated in bad faith. So always be genuine. In the end, it sets a bad vibe, and it's also just a dick move. The chapter also goes a bit more into detail about different kinds of negotiation, not just publisher, but also, for example, you want to negotiate pay. You don't want to pay too much, of course, because you don't have infinite money, whereas the other person would want as much money as possible. How do you find that balance? How do you approach these things from a human aspect and like actually empathize with them? The general negotiation tactics are pretty good. I mean, the chapter is pretty short. If you want to go further in depth about how to negotiate, there's a book, Never Split the Difference, that is just all dedicated to negotiating. And then the last part of the book is also what interested me the most, and that is how do you get money early in your development? So how do you make sure you don't have to wait till you actually release your game before you can start earning money? And it does that through 2 chapters, one on crowdfunding and one on early access. And the crowdfunding one, I think, is pretty all right. It talks really in depth about the numbers and what worked well for certain crowdfunding campaigns, like ways to optimize the average pledge. So you need less pledges to get a higher amount of money versus how do you get scale, how do you do these campaigns. And you can go pretty deep into crowdfunding. I think one thing to keep in mind is that this book is already a few years old at this point, and from my experience, the way that crowdfunding and kickstarting works has shifted a little bit over the past few years, but it is still pretty relevant. And then the most important part for us, because that's what we're doing right now with our game Songs of Everjade, is open development. So this is where you do early access, where you release your game as fast as possible, basically in a somewhat finished state, and then you keep doing updates for like 1 to 2 to even 5 years, and you engage your community and you work towards that V1 launch, and how do you make it sustainable? How do you like hide certain parts of the game so you make sure that people won't get bored of like the first version already, but they'll stay invested in the different updates? And I think the main thing that the book also talks about in both crowdfunding and in early access is it's critical to have an audience before you even launch. Because I've seen plenty of developers who have a game and they have like 1,000 wish lists and they're like, okay, I'm gonna go early access, but that's not enough critical mass to actually get a community running for the game. Like, if you want to do early access well, you need to have a pretty solid community already that is interested in the game before the game is out yet. A lot of people see early access as a tool to get a lot of just free wish lists basically. You put it on early access, which means that people can buy it earlier and then they can earn more money from it and they can fund their development better, but that's not the entire story. It actually takes a lot of effort. You need like dedicated community managers. You need to actively engage with the community, which means that you will have less time to develop those features, for example. It's all things you need to weigh off. So what are my general thoughts of the book? I think for me, the book was almost too easy. What I mean by that is not that, oh, I am some super genius. It's just that I've been running a studio for like 1.5 years already. So for me, reading that book, like most of the things weren't really that new. That's also why I liked the crowdfunding and Kickstarter campaigns the most, because I already knew how do I start a company? How do I do budgeting? How do I work together with external people and things like that? That was all things that were just a small recap for me basically, but I do believe that there is a lot that you can learn from it as well. Some other things to keep in mind is Michael Futter is American, and you can really see the Americanism in this book, so to say. A great example of this is when there's like 2 pages that are spent on healthcare for your employees, which is a very American way of thinking, because like I'm in Belgium, we have free healthcare. I do not need to care that much really about the different kinds of plans, and they don't cost me $500 a month or whatever. I just pay them a regular wage and healthcare is included in our taxes. Something else, for example, that is very typical to the US is getting sued. It's like very easy to get sued in the US for some reason. So you have to really be very protective of yourself there. If you're in Europe also, I feel like we don't have that mindset to immediately sue everyone. Of course, still look into a lawyer for important things, but it's not that you're gonna start your company and immediately you're gonna get sued by one of your players because like their computer exploded whilst they were playing your game. I don't think that's there. So if you're not from the US, this book may at some points feel a bit like alien for you, but I think the like lessons in it are still pretty good. Now, if business is interesting in you, I also want to give a quick plug. If you want to know a bit more about how we run our business, we have our Patreon, where we have the Patreon Insider or Patreon Pro tier, where we break down our full financials, because we do what the book says as well. We do our scheduling, we do our budgeting, and we share all of those raw numbers on our Patreon. Like, for example, how much do we make from our game sales? How much do we make from other ways of monetization, for example, or when we do like sponsorships on these videos. And we also do some bonus videos where we talk a bit more about the in-depth of running a studio. So if that's something you're interested in, I'll link that down below. If you get a Patreon Pro, you also get a coaching call with me where I will sit down with you and look at what is the best thing that you can do for your business. So I hope this gave you a little bit of extra insights. I like the book in general. I don't think it was like world breaking, but it was still a pretty solid read. I'm curious for you guys because I like to read and I want to maybe make this book club a more regular thing. Do you have any books or any topics that you would like me to cover? Please don't take like the 500-page engine documentation books. I'm not gonna bother with those, but maybe about like a topic such as narrative writing is one that I've been reading recently that you want to learn about more. Let me know in the comments down below. Maybe I'll read it and then I'll make another book club probably in like a month or so. Anyways, that's all I really had to say. Thanks for watching. If you're new here, we're game developers, we've made our own game, we're working on our next game, and we just want to share our genuine experiences as being indie game developers with the rest of the world. So if that's something you're interested in, be sure to head down below and subscribe, as it really helps us out and you get these videos twice a week. That's all I had to say. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!